I saw the news that CNS, Catholic News Service, which is funded by the USCCB, is going to be shut down. Their offices are going to be shut down in the US. So I'm just going to read through this article on where Peter is and from CNS. Just listen to this for a moment, and I just want to make some commentary on it afterwards. So yesterday, I saw this story break about Catholic media tragedy on Where Peter Is by Mike Lewis. And this is in relation to the Catholic US bishops shutting down Catholic News Service. Catholic News Service to cease domestic operations at year's end. The US Conference of Catholic Bishops announced to staff May 4th a dramatic reorganization of its communications department, including the closure of the Washington and New York offices of Catholic News Service. Catholic News Agency is another outlet. Catholic News Service here we're talking about. The meetings with newsroom staff, James Rogers, the chief communications officer of the conference, said that the Washington office would be closed at year's end. The Rome bureau of the Catholic News Service will remain open and continue to report on Vatican and international events. A statement released by Bishop's Public Affairs Office said, over the next few months, the USCCB Department of Communications will undertake a significant realignment to better utilize the resources entrusted to the conference by the faithful in a manner that fits the communications environment today. Sadly, this will impact a number of staff. We are grateful for the time and dedication of the committed team of communicators of the conference to serve the church. Job transitions can be difficult, and as this is a personnel matter, further detail will not be discussed at this time. Anyway, they just go on to talk about the Catholic News Service. Mike Lewis goes into it in a little bit more detail, and I just thought I'd read through this. Yesterday brought devastating news for the church and Catholic journalism when Catholic News Service, CNS, announced they will be shutting down their Washington, D.C. and New York bureaus at the end of the year, and that all its US-based staff would be losing their jobs. They also announced that the Rome bureau would remain in operation for now. As one of the few Catholic news outlets in the English-speaking world that covers the Catholic Church accurately, faithfully, and according to high professional standards, this news stunned the Catholic media community. The decision was made as part of a reorganization of the communications department of the USCCB, which will result in 21 employees, mostly CNS staff, losing their jobs. In addition to CNS domestic operations shutting down, the USCCB publishing office, which produces many titles including the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the United States Catholic Catechism for Adults, and the Roman Missal, will also cease operations. According to the official statement from the USCCB, these changes will allow the remaining functions, including the Catholic News Service Rome Bureau and the Office of Public Affairs, a more sustainable foundation on which to do their work. For over 100 years, CNS has served the church as a wire service, producing articles and photos, and more recently videos and other digital content about the Catholic Church at the local, national and international level. Just as local newspapers rely on subscriptions to wire services like the Associated Press and Reuters to cover stories that they don't have the money or resources to do, Catholic News Services provides content for diocesan newspapers and other Catholic publications like America and Sunday Visitor. In recent decades, as Catholic newspapers, as with the journalism industry as a whole, have struggled to remain financially afloat, CNS has provided them with valuable content that has helped them to survive. It is important to note that although CNS is owned and funded by the USCCB, They do not have a great deal of journalistic independence. Sorry, they do have a great deal of journalistic independence built into their contract, and they are unionized. CNS journalism is recognized in the industry as being competent and executed with high professional standards. More important, however, and I know this personally, is the professional integrity of the CNS staff. This is a veteran team of journalists that's losing their jobs. Most of them have worked in the field for decades and have earned the respect of their peers in the industry. If you speak with journalists from other outlets, they recognize and respect the journalism and high standards of the CNS organization. As a Catholic media outlet, Word Peter does not primarily do journalism, although we have been known to commit journalism from time to time. But as a site that regularly provides analysis and commentary on news and events in the church, we rely on good professional and ethical journalism every day. And the quality and standards of the work done by CNS is top notch. You might be asking why they are being shut down if they do such good work. Clearly, a major factor is money. Journalism, especially Catholic journalism, is no longer a profitable industry. In fact, it's difficult to turn a profit in most areas of the Catholic media. Certainly, I don't ever expect the message of Where Peter is to be profitable. It seems the best way to make money in the Catholic media in current environment is to be sensational, ideologically driven, and self-promoting. The rest of us, including CNS, have to rely on donations or funding from people or organizations that believe in the mission of our outlets. And for whatever reason, US bishops decide that the service CNS provides in informing the public about the church isn't worth the cost. But in terms of effectiveness and public visibility, CNS is arguably one of the best things the USCCB has going for it. I fear the decision was made in part because some US bishops were not thrilled with the idea of funding a media organisation they don't have complete ideological control over. Yet the decision to abandon CNS after a century of work seems to oppose the message of Vatican II Decree Inter Mirifica, which says the Church considers one of its duties to announce the good news of salvation also with the help of the media of social communication and to instruct men in their proper use. Additionally, ending the service to diocesan newspapers and other Catholic publications seems to be a signal that the end is near when it comes to the US Church following the decree's call that a good press should be fostered to instill a fully Christian spirit into readers. A truly Catholic press should be set up and encouraged. It should disseminate and properly examine news concerning the life of the Church. Moreover, the faithful ought to be advised of the necessity both to spread and read the Catholic press to formulate Christian judgments for themselves on all events. If good Catholic journalism is going to exist, someone has to believe it's worth paying for. And if no one does, then the entire field will be left to people and organizations with ideological agendas and low standards. I imagine that many US dioceses, assuming their newspapers don't also shut down, will turn to EWTN-owned Catholic news agency. In other words, the shepherds of the US Church will have turned their flocks over to an organization whose constant attacks were described as the work of the devil by the Pope last year. On the treatment of church employees, this story hits particularly close to home for me because I was laid off from my job in the USCCB Communications Department during the last reorganization in May 2017. In late 2016 and early 2017, the months leading up to the layoff, we were told by upper management that our department was going to be reorganized and how the new structure was going to benefit the staff. Layoffs were never mentioned. I was so foolish that I was looking forward to our department's fresh start, which meant that I was completely blindsided by the news that my position had been eliminated. At the time, I was already struggling emotionally. My dad had recently died. We had an infant at home, so the trauma of losing my job totally shattered me. Adding insult to industry was the callous treatment of the conference's chief communications officer about the layoff. It was based on positions and not people. In other words, even though we're completely upended our life, your well-being is meaningless to us. Recovering from the shock and devastation took me a long time. Several years later, I turned down a much higher paying job offer with another company to accept a position at the USCCB because I felt a strong call to work for the church in the areas of media and communications. Unfortunately, my experience there was doing mostly administrative tasks and working on dry and repetitive projects. There was little collaboration and very little opportunity to propose ideas or solve problems. Morale was low. Staff members would watch as managers made poor decisions with money, spending huge sums on overpriced failures and cutting corners on things that produced clear results. One wonders how many jobs could have been saved by repurposing the 28 million the bishops planned to spend on rent out a stadium for a few days in Indianapolis in 2024. Good question, Mike. In the end, it was only after the layoff that I was able to truly respond to that call and help the church communicate the message of Jesus Christ to a group of fellow Catholics through this website. It's hard to ignore the irony that it was only after the institutional church cast me aside I was finally able to use my communication skills to serve the church, share the faith, and help amplify the message of Pope Francis to others. But it was a difficult road, and all of it comes at a high cost. In May 2017, CNS was untouched by the layoff. At the time, USCCB leadership explained that CNS was not affected by the reorganization because of tremendous content creation capacity that is there. It's well respected and well known brand. What a difference 5 years makes. This week, many of my former colleagues, people I admire, many of whom I consider dear friends, were told they were losing their jobs. And remarkably, much of the leadership team whose vision dictated the last reorganization still remains in place. Please keep these fine journalists and communications professionals in your prayers as they discern what's next in their lives, and please pray for our church leaders that they may realize the importance of healthy Catholic media environment. So there we have the news, an opinion on Catholic News Service. What I do take exception with was there where Mike says they do have a great deal of journalistic independence built into their contract. How can you have journalistic independence built into your contract when your employer can walk in any day and say, the whole thing is shut down? Obviously, they were not independent. They were being completely 100% funded by the US Catholic bishops. But I just want to play you a clip here from somebody that would have been part of the committee entitled organised to fund the Catholic News Service. This is Cardinal Kevin Farrell. Just listen to this. This is a clip from Catholic News Service. So just have a listen to this for the moment.
The only thing I can tell you about McCarrick is I was shocked, overwhelmed. I never heard any of this before. When the 6 years I was there with him, I didn't know Cardinal McCarrick prior to his coming to Washington, D.C. I was a priest of Washington, D.C. I've worked in the Chancery in Washington, and never, no indication, none whatsoever, nobody ever talked to me about that. And I was heavily involved in Washington in the whole, from 2000 on, in the sex abuse. So I really don't have any knowledge or anything to add about more than that.
So there you have Cardinal Kevin Farrell, the Camerlengo, very close to Pope Francis. He's a fluent Spanish speaker. Cardinal Kevin Farrell saying he knew nothing. Nobody ever spoke anything about him. He knew nothing about the McCarrick allegations once they broke. However, let's go and look what came out in the McCarrick report. So have a look at this. Let me just read through what Cardinal Kevin Farrell said in the McCarrick report. So here we go to page 289 of the McCarrick report. And if you go to footnote 935, you hear that in an interview, Cardinal Kevin stated that during his time as Vicar General in the Archdiocese of Washington, he occasionally heard old rumours about McCarrick having shared a bed with seminarians in a beach house when McCarrick was Bishop of New Jersey. Cardinal Kevin noted that these rumours were not about sexual activity and didn't ever relate to minors. Farrell only learned of the civil settlements involving McCarrick through the priest grapevine in 2007 and 2008, when Farrell had already installed as Bishop of Dallas. Farrell stated that he was in absolute shock to learn in 2018 that there had been a credible allegation in New York that McCarrick had abused a minor. So why am I talking about Cardinal Kevin? Because Cardinal Kevin was a Bishop of the United States. He was on the USCCB, and Catholic News Service was completely funded by the USCCB. And we have to ask questions regarding the information that the church is giving us, regarding information that bishops are giving us. And we have to independently challenge them. And Catholic News Service wasn't doing that. It simply wasn't. It wasn't capable of doing it. You can't challenge the people that pay you. Otherwise, you're out of a job, which has just happened. And you can say, oh, other people have ideological slants, and Taylor Marshall this, and Anthony Stein that, and Michael Voris this, and EWTN. They're all got these ideological. Well, what you have to do is you have to push back against that, and you say, well, look, if they are saying this, well, you have to give your opinion and your view why their views are not Catholic in your opinion and your views are, and so forth. That's what you need, the dialogue and discussion in the church. And there doesn't seem to be that. There doesn't seem to be that with bishops. You cannot challenge them. You cannot ask them questions. It's very, very hard to, dig in and have a good conversation on exactly, really what's going on in the church. I mean, for example, talk about the Eucharist. Talk about the belief in the Eucharist and how we reverence and love the Eucharist. Try and have a conversation with cardinals and bishops about, okay, how did we go in 50 years from receiving the Eucharist reverently, which is a catechesis in itself, kneeling down, receiving the Eucharist on the tongue, giving witness to our kids the beauty of the Eucharist that we reverence. How do we go in 50 years from that to today, where we march up in our hands with our hands out and receive the Eucharist, and most people don't believe in the Eucharist, and we have a whole generation. Where is that news discussion happening in Catholic media? It's ever discussed. People will pay for good content if you provide them good content. And there is a reason why there's lots of Catholic news organizations out there, funded, growing, expanding, employing people, because they have content that people want to listen to. And if you want to enter that space, you have to provide content that people are willing to listen to and pay for. And many people didn't want to pay or listen to Catholic News Service because it was funded by the United States bishops. These are the bishops that covered up for McCarrick, that knew about McCarrick. And you have an example there of Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who knew 10 years ago about allegations against Cardinal McCarrick. Cardinal Kevin Farrell knew 10 years before. It's there, it's in the report. You can't deny it. So to say he was in absolute complete shock that he didn't know anything, he had heard rumours about McCarrick sleeping with seminarians, and to say, okay, this isn't of sexual nature. What man, what bishop sleeps with seminarians? Or what man sleeps with other men? Come on. Does he think we're stupid when we hear these things, especially in the church? Come on. And then we hear that he knew about settlements. I mean, I'm just giving you a small example of the hypocrisy that exists among church leadership. And they think us laity, are just going to sit back and let them destroy the message of the gospel with this scandal that they will spend more time on. I mean, people will accuse me of being always looking on the negative, always looking to polemicize, to politicize, to be sensationalist, to get clicks on YouTube and so on and so forth. But the question has to be asked, guys. The question has to be asked. When the top leadership in the church are not preaching the gospel, you have to ask why. You have to ask why. And we can see what's going on in Germany. That has endless amounts of money, and the bishops don't really care what the faithful say or do. They'll just push on their agenda, and you have to, well, what is this agenda now? What is this agenda that we're being pushed on? This synodal process, which I have to say is the most confusing thing that I've ever seen. Where is the discussion in Catholic media about what's going on in the church? The church is supposed to preach the deposit of the faith, to preach the gospel, to preach what Christ gave us. And we seem to be turning around to Christ today and saying, well, look, this message you gave us, it's a bit hard now. Now, asking me to remain faithful to one woman for all my life, that's a bit hard, Jesus. Like, maybe, look, I might be faithful to the second woman I married. I mean, seriously, guys, people want to understand exactly what's going on in the church. What is happening to the faith? What did Christ ask us to do, and what are we doing today? Catholics will fund good Catholic media, but they're tired. They're tired of what's going on in the church. Catholics that love the faith are tired of what's going on in the Catholic Church today. And I certainly am. And that's why a lot of people are speaking up, are getting out, are mobilising to push back against what went on, what happened. McCarrick is the tip of the iceberg. You read through that report, you say, who didn't know in the church? I mean, the question is, who didn't know about McCarrick in the United States? Which bishop didn't know about McCarrick in the US? Who didn't know about McCarrick in Rome? Because everybody seems to have known about him. The reports are there. The popes that knew, Cardinal Ratzinger knew, John Paul II knew. People voiced their concerns, and he got to the top became Archbishop of Washington. And then where's the discussion in Catholic media after that? Because the Catholic News Service definitely didn't come out with. Go back to interview Cardinal Kevin on that interview and say, well, you knew nothing. Well, now the McCarrick report has come out, and there is this footnote that you did know X, Y, and Z, that you did know in 2007. Can you give us your views on that? Who told you and all this? There was no follow-up interview. Is that journalism? Is that independent journalism? No, it's not. We all know this. I mean, maybe it's a good thing the pandemic came and funding was cut in the US, because, it's for a reason God is letting these things drop. It's not sensationalism. It's not ideology to ask what is going on in the church. It's not ideology. And people can say, oh, only people with ideological viewpoints are getting traction in the church. They're the people that are getting noticed. People with ideological. It's not ideological to ask what happened to the Mass, what happened to the Eucharist, why priests don't respect the Eucharist, why those who are trained and ordained to be other Christ in the church don't love the Eucharist. It's not ideological. It's logical to ask those questions. And that's what people are asking. That's what Mother Angelica was asking. She was tired what was going in the church. It wasn't ideological what she was trying to do. It was logical. It was logical. I mean, we can understand the fall off in the faith among laity who have never been taught the faith in the first place. We can understand that. What we can't understand are the pastors, are the bishops, are the cardinals in the church who don't love and preach and live the faith. They don't. Cardinal McCarrick, for example, and everybody that knew around him that covered up for him. Is there any wonder why Vigano got frustrated in 2018 and came out? Do people honestly think that Vigano invented all of this? No, he didn't. We would never have had that McCarrick report if it wasn't for Vigano. And you can criticize him all you like, and you can say it's ideological and he's anti-Pope Francis. These things were there in the church. And why am I getting so passionate about this? Cardinal Kevin, in the Irish Times, came out and he said he didn't know Father Marcial. He'd only met him once and twice. We're laughing at that. He knew Father Marcial. He was a legionary of Christ. I was a legionary of Christ. I know how that organisation worked. You can't fob us off anymore. You can't fob off the church. Yes, Catholic media has to help preach the gospel. We have to help preach the good news of Christ. But you have to ask the questions when it's not being done, why it's not being done. These are the things that need to be asked in the church today. And I think people can understand why people are passionate. People will listen to people who give them the truth, give them the facts. And you can go after. I mean, it's amazing to see how American Catholic media, especially because they influence Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, all the other English-speaking Catholic world. But American Catholic media, that whole field, has really mobilised, has really taken off. I mean, in Taylor Marshall, which has 10 times the reach that Catholic News Service has, 10 times the reach. And people refuse to engage with him. They called him a grafter. They call him this, that and the other. I don't agree with everything Taylor Marshall does. I don't. I think it's another world of Catholic. But you have to ask your question. He's able to get his voice out there. How come Catholic News Service wasn't able to get their voice out there to the same extent as Taylor Marshall does? Let's face it. Catholic News Service had 10 times more funding. Their salary must have been at least $1 million a year, at least for 21 employees. You're talking about, if not more, plus renting off, God knows what you're spending. I mean, do you see where it's coming? It's the same in Ireland. The Catholic bishops here will spend money on media, and you wonder, what are you spending it on when you're not able to engage with the people? You know? It's a fascinating time to be alive, but I have to push back. You can't say Catholic News Service was an independent organisation, independent journalism. You can't. Because if it was independent journalism, they would be still in existence. But they weren't independent. They were wholly beholden to the people that paid them. And if those people that paid them, the US bishops, didn't like what they were writing, that was it. You were gone. It's simple as. The last place you would go for objective Catholic news would be Catholic News Service. Everybody knows this. Let's not pretend. These are the realities of the Catholic Church. We need to understand why the gospel isn't being preached by those who are trained and formed to preach that. And we will keep asking questions, and people will keep asking questions. You can kick back shysters and grafters and all these things that people lump at people that are asking questions. The Michael Viruses, the Anthony Steins, the Taylor Marshalls, all of these Catholic bloggers in America now that control what people are listening to in the Catholic world, that are asking questions. You have to, you cannot not engage with them anymore. You have to sit down and engage with them. If they're holding an opinion or a view that you're not happy with, you have to sit down and have a conversation with them. You know, Timothy Gordon's, the Gordon brothers. You know, you have to sit down and dialogue and ask the questions. Well, you're putting this point of view forward. You're giving this new story. We want to push back. I mean, it's the same in the traditional world. People in the traditional world, they don't like church militant because they're investigating the Society of St. Pius X. Isn't it good that they're doing that? Isn't it good that they're sitting down, taking the time to investigate problems that are suffocating the church preaching the gospel? Because it has to be done. It simply has to be done in the church. It has to be done. And so I do think that this story is interesting in a way. I don't agree with Mike Lewis's view on this. There are ways and means of preaching the gospel, in this context, in the news context, that should be done to help cleanse the church of what has happened. You know, you have to face up to problems. You have to deal with problems, and you have to reform and move forward. You can't just keep shoving them aside and pretend they don't exist. You have to deal with what's going on in the church, and that hasn't been done. I mean, that's just my view on this particular topic. Catholics will pay for good news services and good content that helps them grow in the faith. Catholics will pay for this. They won't pay for Catholic bishops' mouthpieces that are, waste of money, waste of their money, that don't tell you the full story. They won't pay for it. They won't support it. And Catholics are waking up because the church is getting, in the Western world, the church is getting smaller and smaller. It really is. Budgets are tightening, funds are tightening, and decisions have to be made. And people are very cautious about who they're going to spend their money on and who they're going to give their money to. I mean, I would never subscribe to Catholic news. I would never subscribe to a service promoted by Catholic bishops in that way. I wouldn't subscribe until Catholic bishops can own up and be honest about what has gone on in the church and have dialogue. There are some very, very good bishops. I do like, people might criticize me. I do like Bishop Barron. I do like his content. I like the content. I don't agree with everything he does or says, but he's a good communicator, and I do like that content. Bishop Schneider, but it's frustrating for Catholics, I'm this frustration that I'm venting. There's many Catholics that say the same. The church could be on fire, growing, amazing, if those who had dedicated their lives to studying the faith lived it. You have to start living it first. Live it instead of what we see, And I think the whole vegano thing since the last 4 years, really is, the sad result of years and years and years of corruption in the church. It's we saw what McCarrick did. That report is damning, and it's not just McCarrick. There are other bishops. There are other bishops. You wonder when you see some bishops getting promoted. You say, "What? How did you get there? Who did you pay off?" I mean, it's sad in a way what's going on, but that's life. Anyways, sorry to ramble on, but I have to push back against the narrative here on Catholic News Service that they were some stellar organization and so on and so forth. They were a mouthpiece for American bishops. American bishops such as Cardinal Kevin Farrell, such as McCarrick, and others. And you cannot say that they were truly independent and they were giving a service to the church as independent journalism. They weren't. They were reporting and offering what their employers had told them to do, nothing more. And when funds got tight, they cut them off. As for publishing and so forth, well, that can be outsourced. You don't need a Catholic News agency for association. Catholic News Service. Catholic News Agency is the EWTN. But look. So where are we going with this? Where are we going with providing good media in the church? We can look. Ascension Presents, independent, very good, very, very good at providing information and formation in the church. But if you're going to report news, you have to be independent. I mean, secular news agencies will do this all the time. The Boston Globe and so forth. They will cover what we refuse to cover. Somebody will cover it at some stage. And you might say it's right or wrong. I mean, if you don't cover the problems, address the problems and talk about the problems, nothing will change in the church. Nothing will change. If Vigano hadn't done what he had done, would we have had the McCarrick report? Would things have changed? No. So, look, let's hope that there will be reform in the church, especially when it comes to Catholic media. If you're going to provide news, if you're going to give Catholics news, you have to be independent and balanced and give them the facts, not give them fiction or not give them silence. That's just my thoughts on it. Anyway, God bless. Take care. Bye bye.